Well, good evening, everyone. This is John Craig,
And this is Sandy.
and it's good to be with you this evening on the third day of the week for Walking in Spirit and Truth. And we've got a great show planned for you this evening. A great study. Sandy's been working hard on it. And then, of course, following Walking in Spirit and Truth, we're going to have the Craig Report. You want to stay tuned for that because we got some great information, some updates that we're going to be reviewing this evening.
Yes, we are. And as John said, we are glad that you've joined us, and we're continuing in our study with Psalm 23. And we are actually on verse 4. But before we get into the Hebrew language of that, I had wanted last week and partially this week at least to go over just some of the things concerning fear. And so last week we mentioned something, which is the frequency of fear. And after we read the scripture, I want us to go ahead and talk about that for a minute, because the frequency of fear, something very interesting, because we hear about frequencies all the time, especially in the Hebrew Roots Messianic movement. So let's go ahead and turn in scripture to Psalm 23, and we'll read the whole psalm.
All right, so Psalm 23, verse 1, beginning with verse 1, a psalm of David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever.
Well, hallelujah for that. We will dwell in the house of Yah forever. Now, let us go to this concept of the frequency of fear, just to briefly mention it. I know, John, you brought it up last week, so I'm going to let you talk for a few minutes about the frequency of fear, because everything has a frequency. We know that sound has a frequency. We even know that some say the emotions that we have and share have the frequency. Joe says we need to have the frequency of victory in Yeshua, and that's an amen to that. But there are so many things that we are just now beginning to understand that God has created, that Yahweh has created, that as we begin to understand them, it opens up this whole new paradigm on how we function and how the world functions. And frequency is one of those concepts. And we understand that even in music, that the frequency that most musicians play to in the Western world, or at least here in the United States, is 440 hertz. And that actually has only been around for 100 years, and it's what the Nazis used. We didn't use that before that time, before at least maybe after World War II. I'm not sure when we switched, but we were at 432 hertz, which is better. It's better. It's said that all the great composers of old did it at 432. Now Israel tunes to 444, which is supposed to be a frequency of healing, and actually we do that too. Now, and we're not here to get all into all the science on those frequencies, but the reason that we tune to the same thing that Israel tunes to is because it is very healing. That kind of music changes the way you feel and react. And whereas the other, that 440 hertz, 440, actually is said that even secular people will say that the music doesn't even have the value that it once did once we started tuning to this. And you have to think, why would we do that? Why would we copy the Nazis on something? I would say there's nefarious purposes behind that, but that's a whole nother show if we get into the musicality of all of that. But there is a frequency. We even know that as the tiger roars, the lion roars, it's at about 18 decibels, which is below our hearing, but it still creates this fear within it, within the prey. And some say that actually paralyzes the prey of the tiger, of the lion, and causes them to become easy prey. I was looking up some things on frequency. It is really sad. I think the movie was called Irreverence or something like that, but it was said that the director or the director or the producer, I'm not sure which, had this sound throughout the whole show, the whole movie, to create fear and panic and make everyone uncomfortable and dreading what was coming next. And it's supposed to be a scary bad movie or something, but it actually, he did that so he could bring out those emotions and those feelings with the audience, because the audience that watches that movie is one that's geared more towards a horror or a horror type of show. And so secular people understand frequency, even the frequency of emotion. There's said to be, just as there is a frequency of fear, there is said to be a frequency of love. And so our emotions even carry their frequency. We know that there's a frequency in the clothing we wear. There are so many different things that most of us, and at least in Western society or in this day and this hour, we don't understand, but there is a lot to it, and people are coming into the revelation and understanding of those things. So let's gear it back in and hone it back in to that fear frequency. And I know I told you, John, that you were going to talk, and then I started talking. So why don't you chime in? Because I know, as you brought it up last week, you've also studied it out a little bit, and we'll have some commentary.
Well, I did. I was looking into it, and honestly, you can really go down a rabbit hole that is, it's not really, he actually, there's a whole bunch of different things when you go to frequency, because you can get into the new age and you can start getting into the occult uses of the frequencies, and then what those things are tied to. And here's what my thoughts are. And going off what you said, Sandy, yes, the God frequency, the what's come to be known as the key of King David, is the 444 megahertz. That's what we tune to at Life of Worship for our worship team. And it's what King David played his harp in this key. And remember, King David, when he was called in to play his harp before King Saul, when King Saul was being agitated by demons. And you say, well, what happened to King Saul? Is when King Saul was disobedient, and he didn't slaughter all the sheep, and he didn't slaughter all the people, and he didn't slaughter the king. And Samuel came out there and said, what's this bleating of sheep? The kingdom has been torn from you, and y'all will replace you with another. It's from that point in time you see that King Saul really goes downhill spiritually. It was as if all of the protection of Yah had been removed from him. And so there would be times of agitation, and he would literally have demonic torment, and they would bring in David to play his harp and to sing in order to, at that frequency, I can't explain it, but we can see scripturally, it would bring shalom. It would bring a peace. And those demonic entities that were tormenting King Saul would be silenced. And so we know that frequency is a God-given gift, but on the other hand, we see that there is a spiritual connection at frequencies that Hasatan will use and his minions will use, and our bodies are there are frequencies within our body, just like the whole world is made of frequencies. It just depends on how dense that frequency is. Anything from granite rock has got a frequency, and light has a frequency. So you have the sunlight has a particular frequency, and then you also can have infrared light has a particular frequency. And as Sandy was talking about earlier, in the roar of the island at 18 hertz, that roar of the lion has that sound we can't hear below 19 hertz and megahertz. And so, but if that sound is there, our body can still pick it up. We can still hear that. And what they have found is in scientific studies at particular frequencies that a body will react. There's a certain um, um, what's the right word? It's the disconcerted type of feeling, an uncomfortable feeling, even to a point of anxiety, and which leads into fear. It causes a little bit of that. I hear something's wrong, and I don't know if I need to um, run or fight. It's that flee or fight type of thing that begins to rise up within us. These are the frequencies that affect us emotionally. Now, on the other side, you can go down the dark path, and I'm going to tell you this because this is not me. This is what those that follow frequencies in the New Age world, in the occult, in all of these different elements, these different groups, these communities, these where they take the whole body and they assign a particular frequency to different levels of the body, from the head all the way down to the tailbone, and all of these different things. And it is truly an occult practice, and each one of those levels is assigned particular deities. And this is why I don't really want to go down these dark holes and these dark paths, because these frequencies are the things that people actually use, taking what God created for good in order to bring about uh, a demonic connections, those things that attract the demonic. So this frequency of fear, which is very, very low, resonates. But if our body begins to respond to that, then and our body begins to um, uh, connect with that frequency, there's that we have to be. I keep stumbling over this because I really don't want to say it. Is that there is a realm by which the demonic is attracted to it, and so God's not given us a spirit of fear, but that of power, love, and a sound mind, and that's a spirit, and that is something that we have to battle, and all these different things. For example, when we have over the last couple of years, when we had the fear of this particular disease that was coming, what has the mainstream media wanting to do? What is the government wanting to do? It keeps causing people to react and to that spirit of fear, and in order to, and then it continues to try to maintain it. And when people allow that to maintain in their body, then it resonates, and it creates it creates those negative pathways, and we don't want to be connected to those negative pathways. Those are the things that our body is a creation of God, and as Yahweh is has created things to be, to resonate within certain frequencies. We're not created to do that. It brings harm. It brings harm to the body, and we have to understand where that's at. And when we go down there and we go down to those levels, then it has then the negative effects within the body, the negative functions, those things where the body begins to break down, the cells begin to break down. We see disease and all that type of thing begin to manifest itself physically within our bodies, because we allowed ourselves to be connected to those places that God doesn't want us to be. He said that He's not given us a spirit of fear. So why would we stay there? Why would we want to entertain that? Because it has a frequency. It is a spirit. It is it has negative effects on our walk with Yah, and it has negative effects in our relationships with others and how we do it. I mean, think about how many people isolated themselves during the last 2 years because of fear. It has negative effects emotionally, physically, socially, all of these different things, because they connected to that which God didn't design us to live in, because He didn't give us a spirit of fear, but He gave us that of power, love, and a sound mind. And yes, those like fear, those have a frequency. But the thing is not in terms, I'm looking at it simply as a scientific level. Our body does respond to that. And therefore, when we get out of the pit of fear and then we allow us to connect with the love of Yahweh, when we allow ourselves to sit and rest in his shalom, when we stop focusing on one level and we begin to elevate our thinking and our spirit. And when it tells us what are we supposed to think about, we're supposed to be thinking about dwell on these good things. We're not supposed to, and we're supposed to bear the fruit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These things scientifically have been studied out that they actually have a resonance. So, and they've done this all the way down with laboratory mice, and they put the electrodes in their brain and all these different things. So, yeah, so scientifically they studied these things out, and yet we know, because we are spiritual beings living in a physical body, we know there's a connection. And where does God want us to live? He wants us to live in his shalom and in his peace. And that's where we always define that word, where there's nothing missing, nothing broken, fullness, wholeness, and completeness. There's a particular elevation that when we connect with the very heart of God and we allow his spirit to fill us, then things begin to work out within our bodies physically. It's amazing how it all works together. I wish I knew more. I wish I had a better understanding of it. But these are just elements we got to check ourselves. We have to be able to recognize that we've got to come out of fear and have courage, boldness, and that operates out of love. And why? Because fear has to do with punishment. Why do we sit around and wallow in fear? When fear has to do with punishment, we're afraid that something negative, something bad will happen. For example, 2 years, some people never came out of their homes. They had their groceries delivered, they had their food delivered, they worked from home, they didn't go out. Why? Because of the boogeyman. And that boogeyman had a particular name for a disease that we can't say because we don't want to be banned on this channel. So, but that is that's, and then yet those negative effects, then they have a it's like an echo chamber. And once it begins, it starts in this endless loop that unless it's broken, unless someone comes out of it, they're caught in the endless loop. Let me give you another example. And this is where our bodies, when we look at DNA, for example, DNA is a double-stranded helix. And if you look at it, and it's connected by each of the double strands are connected by whatever you call it, the RNA or whatever it is that connects one side to the next. And some people have taken that and said, wow, this in one sense is, when it's working in harmony, it is like Jacob's ladder. It is a connection, and people have had studies on it. Very interesting. But if you look at the double helix, what does it look like? It looks like a sound wave, and both of those sound waves are working in tandem with each other perfectly. And when we understand how that is a frequency working together to bring about harmony within our bodies and our structures, when it begins to break down and those strands in between begin to break, then the body isn't working. Why would it break? It's because perhaps one side of the helix and the other side of the helix is not operating in harmony with each other, and it gets a little out of balance, snaps. One of those, I'm talking in real basic layman terms, and I could be completely wrong, but to me it makes sense. If those two strands get out of harmony, then there's a breakdown. And so what happens when we live in fear? That fear is not in harmonic with our Creator. And that's the key: being in rhythm with our Creator, being in harmony with our Creator causes us to resonate with the things that he resonates with. In other words, another way to say it is that we love what he loves, we hate what he hates. When we step out and we begin to love something outside of what he loves, then we are breaking from that harmonious connection. And it causes problems. First, it causes problems spiritually, then it causes problems emotionally, then it causes problems physically. It's all connected. So, anyway, I when I was looking at this, in fact, one chart that I looked at in terms of frequency that I saw, I was like, oh my goodness, because I'm going to tell you, the occult actually takes these frequencies and it ties it in with various um, oh powers, principalities, demonic spirits with names that affect those particular regions within the body. And in that occult practice, it ties it in to a an occult temple that mimics the temple of Yah. And we've had these teachings before. We've talked about how the body or the temple represents the body. The body is represented in the temple or the tabernacle. Well, there is a counterfeit temple. And when we start connecting with these wrong frequencies, we are opening up doors in ways that we don't want to go there. And we don't want to elevate ourselves into any type of demonic or occult realm. It is a hole, it's a pit, and it's a distraction, and it brings destruction. There you go. There's my 2 cents, Sandy.
I think that was more than 2 cents, but it was good. Thank you. You said so many things that we probably should understand better, and you've got to be very careful, but yet you need to know the tactics of the enemy. How do you fight in war? How do you fight? You anticipate the enemy's moves so that you can, instead of just running away, you can be on the offense instead. So you said some really interesting things there, and I want to play off one thing you said after I read this quote from Max Lucado. He said, fear, his modus operandi, is to manipulate you with the mysterious, to taunt you with the unknown. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of God, fear of tomorrow. His arsenal is vast. His goal, to create cowardly, joyless souls. He doesn't want you to make the journey to the mountain. He figures if he can rattle you enough, you will take your eyes off the peaks and settle for a dull existence in the flatlands. I thought that was a pretty good quote, and it's true. I'm going to get into all the detail of the physical things because we did that last week some, and we're doing it. We're going to go forward this week, but I want us to understand that even the animal, they just said that animals can smell fear on us when we fear. So think about
that. Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm out in the public all the time, dealing with different customers and that type of thing. How many times do we actually, if a customer has a dog or a cat, how many times, and I've seen this not just in my case, but how many times, depending on who that person is, that dog or that cat's friendly or not. Now, some dogs are just not friendly. They just don't like anybody that's around in their yard that they don't know. And they're going to bark, you're an invader, all that sort of thing. I think about Chihuahuas. That's just, so many Chihuahuas are like that. I mean, they just bark, 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 bark. You're just invading and I don't want to be around you. Get away. And, but they can recognize, Sandy, you and I were at the store the other day, and at Tractor Supply, and here's this dog walking around. It's not the first time at Tractor Supply either. And these dogs are like coming up to it. Oh yeah, you smell good, or you smell friendly, that type of thing. They come up and and they recognize the spirit, they recognize the that which you carry. And but if somebody is very fearful, like, go get that dog away from me, that dog is going to say, whoa, I don't like you, something's wrong here. And uh, I don't know how many different times when that I've seen this happen, that when a dog recognizes that someone's fearful, they get a kind of aggressive. I don't know if that's the proper term, but they get aggressive, they get vocal, they growl, they show their teeth. There's something that they recognize that they don't want to be around. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, stay in with me on that, because if here's what we don't understand as people. If fear has a frequency, fear has a smell, there's probably other parts of our senses that we don't understand or even knowingly know are affected by negative emotions. Let's go back to the experiment that we showed a video of it years ago about a plant. Okay, because we know our voice has a frequency. That's an audio frequency we're talking about here. But when you spoke words, there was one with music, but there's one with words. When they spoke words of affirmation and love, the plants grew. And when they spoke death, it died. The plants died and shriveled and were less than healthy. So this emotion, this feeling, this spirit, because we need to remember, he says, I did not give you a spirit of fear. So if you think that it's not connected to a spiritual realm, you are wrong. It is a spirit. Yes, it can be emotion that opens the door for the spirit to take hold of. But there are so many things that we don't understand, that the whole world is affected by one person, one emotion. Maybe that's a little broad, but what we feel, what we do, and how we act is not solely affecting us and us alone. It affects those around us. It affects how we act and react and interact with others. And so there's so much more that we don't understand. Again, for fear, for there to be a frequency of fear, for there to, that would draw in evil even in itself, for there to be a smell of fear. And there's so many other things we don't even know. And that takes me back to something else you mentioned. And you mentioned the thing that's been going around for 2 years that has basically paralyzed so many people and nations and communities and destroyed livelihoods and things like that. Now, I guess the borders were never closed in this instance, but so many things were closed down. And there's always a threat out there that could happen again. And you close schools, you close businesses died and were never recovered. But if we use that same logic, because of a spirit of fear, and I would say that thing took over and took hold of people, and many are still walking in that same spirit. It started off maybe as a feeling and as emotion, but it has turned into something much greater. But if we use the same logic, that the powers that be did to create that fear amongst the people. But if we use that logic, then we need to close every highway, not just close businesses. We need to close every highway because there's accidents. So you better not have any open highways or drive anymore because there are accidents. In fact, you better not fly because there can be a plane crash. Or maybe we shouldn't even eat anymore because obesity is a cause of death. I mean, we can go to the ridiculousness of it because of fear.
If you eat, you might get food poisoning after all. I mean, so
there you
better
go.
not eat, right?
Yeah. Or what about dangerous jobs? Well, let's just not have anybody do those jobs anymore. For fear to literally form and reform our society, for us to make laws and decisions out of fear is stupidity, but it is the way that the enemy controls the masses, and that those that walk with the enemy control the masses, which are the people that are in control. It makes a lot better news to create a panic and threat of imminent danger at all times. And think about this. Why do we spend so much time worrying? Why do we worry about the threat of a flu or or the what ifs of tomorrow, real or unimagined threats? So it doesn't matter. Why do we spend so much time worrying? All we have to do is listen to the headlines, and a spirit of fear could actually come over us if we're not listening to them with the right ears. What do I mean by that? We trust in Yahweh and we need to be informed. So we need to find sources where we can get information that is not going to be lies. And when we listen to that and we make decisions or pray over things, we do that with the understanding that we trust Yahweh in all things and that He's got us in control. But we see how the enemy is putting pieces together so that we know how to combat it, so that we know how to stand when others don't. But still, we have a society of worry, people that worry, that fear, and it's maybe we can look at the answer in the philosophy of life. In the Western world, what does it basically say? Besides, if it feels good, do it. It's anything can happen to you at any time. Ooh, what should we do? Something could happen. This could happen or that could happen.
Well,
Everything is unpredictable. What?
think about this, and we started seeing this back in the 70s, going into the 80s, where we see the rise of the nanny state. And remember, because it was back in those days, is that if you rode your bicycle, I mean, who wore a helmet when they rode their bicycle?
Never did. Never heard of such a thing.
When you skateboarded, did you wear a helmet and knee
No.
pads and elbow pads and gloves and all that? No, we didn't. We didn't do any of that stuff. The nanny state said, "Oh, life is dangerous." But why? Why did they start doing it? I think it was the biggest marketing ploy out there, because they were able to sell more products. Oh, you need a helmet, you need gloves, you need knee pads, you need elbow pads, all of these different things. You can't get hurt. Now, granted, I understand, yes, there were accidents, head injuries, all that different thing that could happen, and they did happen. And but the nanny state came up.
Can't something happen with anything we're doing?
But you can trip on the edge of the carpet at the threshold of your door and bump your head on your way down, and you can have a head injury. So I guess we should always wear helmets. In fact, this current administration,
Bubble wrap.
Bubble wrap. They want us to. They're talking about wearing masks indoors in our own homes now, mandating that. I mean, it's clown world. It is a clown world. But why? Because they know they can control using fear, like you said.
And if one thing is tired and worn out, they'll find something else because they want us to be afraid. They want us to fear. And if the belief is the world is nothing more than a random interaction of particles in a vortex, you're subject to all the forces that are around you and you have no control. Well, we do. We rest in Yahweh. That is the answer. But the world says you need to be afraid. You might come in contact with somebody who has something, or you might cross a drunk driver, or you might lose your job, or maybe you'll have a heart attack, or maybe whatever. And it's this Greek outlook on life that we need to fear. We need to be afraid, but we need to remember as well that Yahweh is the sovereign ruler of the universe. He is the creator of everything, He is the Holy One of Israel, and He is the one that has a plan and a purpose for our life. But we hop out of His plans and purposes when we walk around with worry and the what ifs of society. What if we had that?
I was just going to say, isn't it true that when we jump into that realm, is that one, it's saying, well, Yahweh's not big enough for my circumstances, and two, then we fall under the control of Hasatan. And I say that is because in that verse, I will fear no evil. And that word, and I know you're going to get there eventually, so I don't want to jump the gun. I will fear no evil, ra'ah, which is literally, I won't say, we can say it maybe spiritually, maybe we can say it there's a connection here, but it's connected to falling under a hex or a vex, or um, it's connected to taking on a mark of Hasatan, saying God's not big enough, so this other entity is bigger, and I trust in it more than I trust in Yahweh, and 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 it's connected to the fact that um, something adversity, affliction, calamity, these where it says, I will fear no adversity, I will fear nothing bad or calamity or hex or vex or anything wicked, and let alone any type of ill mark. That's literally when we step out and we're not walking in fear, that I will fear no evil, then we are disassociating ourselves with the delusion and the deceptive and the that siren call of the enemy trying to pull us into that level where ultimately we're being controlled and manipulated by.
That's good. That's really good. Trust in Him, bottom line. Trust in Him. Realize what's out there. Yeah, there are things out there and threats out there, but we don't have to be a part of them, and we don't have to receive the threat. We don't have to open that door. He's in charge. He's sovereign. We cannot make our decisions and base our life on the what ifs and the worry and what might happen to me. We have to make our decisions and live on the basis of we trust in Yah
Mm-hmm.
over everything else.
Yeah.
We are His servants. We do His will. We follow His commands. We are in covenant with Him. His enemies are our enemies, and our enemies are His enemies. And if I would come down with something, well, then it's going to serve His purposes for a reason, and I will get out on the other side. If I would
Well,
face
one
a
of the things.
trial, if I would face a trial, an accident, something else that happens, it will be used for His purposes, and I will come out on the other side with a great testimony. We have to adjust the way we see the obstacles and the threats that are around us. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Because that's exactly right. Because the if we fall for this delusion of Hasatan that pulls us into that, we we start recognizing, why am I fearful? Why am I fretting? Why am I uh, doing this? Understand is that now we're recognizing our own wretchedness. Okay, it's saying I'm really in a pit. I'm really covered in miry clay, and this is not where God wants me to live. And that first point of recognizing it, that honestly, when we recognize that point, man, that's an awesome time, especially that we're coming into this time of of Passover and unleavened bread, is to recognize that is leaven I don't need in my body. I don't need that in my thinking. I don't need that in my soul. I don't need it in my lifestyle, and I don't need to project that in my life. And that we take care of it. Say, Father, I'm wretched. We confess that before Him. I am wretched. I'm living in a place that you don't want me to be living. You didn't create me to live in this place. And in spite of circumstances, current events, whatever it is, still I'm living in a bad place. Doesn't mean we go bury our heads somewhere out there and just try to turn the noise off and turn everything off. No, I mean, I don't think that's wisdom. But it is everything having to do with the proper attitude that aligns ourselves with the word. And so when we recognize that wretchedness and we confess it, we also have to confess and we have to renounce that we have aligned ourselves with the plan of Hasatan. We actually allowed ourselves to be deluded, to be enticed, and to be brought in to that realm. And we have to renounce that connection and any connection that it's affected us uh, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, and renounce all those three layers. And then we got to start making sure that our good confession is aligned with the word. and that we are not speaking contrary. We're not speaking the death of ourselves. We're not speaking the pain of ourselves or our situations or the woes is me or whatever. That we elevate ourselves to that which is in alignment with what Yahweh already said about us. And there's tons of scripture that tells us where we're supposed to be living at.
Really good. Well, thank you, John, for really taking us on this journey today. It's good, and it's an encouragement, and it's a reminder that we live in a world where the enemy tries to counterfeit all that's good that Yah creates, but we trust in him. So we will continue on this path next week, and I hope that you got something from this evening. And anyway, there's more coming up because the news part of this show is up next.
All right. Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the other side here on lamnetwork.tv.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.